is going to engage in some questions with that. I just didn't want to get into 68 without walking everybody through because we don't learn this in school. That's the only thing. That's the only reason I wanted to just stop it.
Okay, I was just going to talk about the 64 Civil Rights Act and the interesting thing about it. It's not really a Civil Rights Act, it's a military act. And I'll get into that later. The 57 one was an interesting one.
Perfect. And that's why I'm going to jump in here. This is Chief Biko there, Judge. And, I just kind of wanted to start, I guess, with Thurgood Marshall. We all know about if you don't know about the Board of Education, Brown versus Board of Education, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the role that Thurgood kind of played within the civil rights and also what impact he had on your life as far as becoming a judge, if any.
Well, when I never wanted to be a judge. That wasn't one of my ambitions. I didn't even want to be a lawyer. I had some other things. Mr. Thurgood Marshall, His Honor Thurgood Marshall, Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, was also known as Mr. Baseball. Why? Because whenever he showed up with part of this campaign to start setting the precedents that led to Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, he always required that his invitees provide him with a Louisville Slugger in case he had to beat somebody across the head who wanted to get too ugly with him. He wanted a short barrel 12-gauge shotgun, a riot gun. He preferred Model 12 Winchesters and 1897 Winchesters and a 25-round box of double-aught buckshot. That was Thurgood Marshall. He took no nonsense. And he had an interesting theory, which I heard him elaborate upon in a lecture 50-some years ago. What he said was, before they came up with the Civil Rights Acts, prior to Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 and this one in 1957, there were no laws outside of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which were just general concepts, not specific, that dealt with civil rights. So what he did is embarked on a theory to set up the precedents, if not the actual statutes, and he relied on the SPCA laws, the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And his theory is if you can't do it to a dog, you can't do it to a Negro. And he got or took advantage of Jews who financed a lot of black activity, because the theory became, if you can't do it to a Negro, you can't do it to a Jew. And he expanded that on, if you can't do it to a dog, you can't do it to a Negro, you can't do it to a Jew. So that secured the economic basis for what happened with the civil rights actions and the act, or the Brown v. Board of Education situation that led to all of the acts after that. You had veterans who weren't going to put up with anything because they had risked death fighting Germans and Japanese and Italians and Koreans, and they simply weren't going to put up with things. They didn't get involved in the Civil Rights Acts or civil rights protest much because they weren't into peaceful nonviolence. Their thing was lift a hand to me and you might not bring it back. But there were those factors that glamorized civil rights activities of peaceful nonviolence, which did not include a lot of Black Americans nor Native Americans, because there were other ways of doing these things. But I exceed myself.
No, I definitely appreciate you expounding on that. It sounds to me that Thurgood was about that life as far as...
Okay, I'll give you one last example here.
Go ahead.
Just to explain. We all think of Rosa Parks as not going to the back of the bus, right? She peacefully submitted to arrest, and there were several other ladies that got arrested for not moving to the back of the bus, and they picked her as the figurehead because she had a pretty decent background. Have we ever heard of Jackie Robinson, the baseball player?
Yes.
He got into baseball because he refused to move to the back of the bus in 1943. He was in Texas, where the 761st Armored Battalion was located, which was all black. He was a captain. He had gone to UCLA, where he played football and ran track. He held the American record for the 100-yard dash and the 220-yard dash. Fastest man in America. He had eclipsed Jesse Owens. He played football. He was a halfback for UCLA. Never played baseball at all. He became in charge of morale for the 761st Armored Battalion. And he put in place some softball games. Well, one particular day, he was officer of the day. And what happened is he was replaced as evening officer by a colleague. The colleague had his wife come visit. So Jackie Robinson, Captain Robinson, still in uniform, still with his 45 strapped on, he escorted the man's wife home, took a taxi. When he came back, he took the bus. They told him to remove himself to the back of the bus. He refused, and during the course of his court-martial, he wound up confronted by the Texas Rangers, local yokels, and some MPs. The testimony was he pulled his 45 out, jacked around in the chamber, and said, "Some MF is going to die tonight besides me." So eventually somebody from his battalion showed up and he surrendered to them. He was court-martialed but acquitted. And at that point, because he had injured his ankle playing football, he then waived his waiver of physical injury, which would have given him an exemption from service, and he resigned. He asked somebody what to do. They said, "Well, why don't you go down and deal with joining up with the Negro leagues?" And he said, "Well, I don't play baseball." I said, "But Captain, anytime you come to bat, everybody backs up and you're the fastest man in America. Can't anybody run the bases like you?" So Jackie Robinson wound up being a baseball player, for which he's known, because he wouldn't move to the back of the bus. And he pulled his 45 out and was ready to die right there on the scene. It wasn't peaceful. It was not nonviolent. But you see, we don't hear that because nobody wanted that dialogue to come up with. Jackie Robinson had a short fuse to his temper. He could fight. And you ever heard of John Connors, the actor that played the rifleman, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy?
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, it was a popular series, a Western series. Well, Conyers was a baseball player on the Dodgers. And one time they beamed Jackie. They deliberately hit him. Jackie is going out to the mound to punch this dude in the jaw. Jackie was a powerful man. So Conyers ran out of the bullpen and knocked the white boy out. Thereafter, he became Robinson's bodyguard because Jackie Robinson had a short temper. Conyers became the rifleman, and Jackie was pushed as a peaceful man, and what he did that was not nonviolent was suppressed, because certain other figures felt that would hurt the so-called nonviolent civil rights movement. I'll pass it back to you.
Judge O'Brien, I cannot let you skip over something. You touched on a lot of points. You said the Civil Rights Acts started from military law. Can't let you come on back to that. Make that
That's 1964. I thought we were going to 57.
Right, but
1964. Okay, Lyndon Baines Johnson was an interesting character.
How was it military? How was it military law for the?
Here's what he did. Kennedy introduced a very lukewarm Civil Rights Act. It didn't do much of anything, but Johnson was, when he became president he withdrew Kennedy's act and introduced a much stronger one. And he was known with his 6'4" going on 6'5" self for leaning with an elbow on a shorter man's shoulder and punching him in the chest with his finger and said, "Look, last year I told you you could do what you want with the Negroes, but this year, damn it, you're going to give them what they want. And I'll make you look like a commie-loving bastard if you vote against this." What he did was brilliant. He introduced it as a military preparedness bill. It says in the preamble, whereas the United States of America is engaged in a life or death struggle throughout the world with the forces of totalitarianism and communism, and whereas the armed services are the first line of defense, and whereas the military has long been integrated, et cetera, he talked with a lot of whereases that the base commanders could not control the conditions that impacted the military personnel, including guess who and their families. So be it resolved that this Civil Rights Act is necessary to ensure that the morale of all of the troops of the United States Armed Forces are not diminished. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is actually a military bill.
And that actually proves our prisoner of war status, Judge Joe Brown, because
well, no, not so much prisoner of war. It's that the armed services, thanks to Executive Order 1981, signed by Harry Truman in 1947, had been integrated. So when a good percentage of your armed forces are feeling discriminated against, their morale is lowered because of the discriminatory treatment they received, as a method of keeping the morale high, you needed the civil rights bill so that the base commanders had something to rely upon to keep a good percentage of their troops, sailors, and airmen from being discriminated against, and reducing their morale and the ability of the armed services to cope with worldwide totalitarianism and communism. That's the way it was presented.
That's a very nice way of saying, due to, from a procedural standpoint within Congress, because legislatively Congress never recognized this group of people who are not on the Dawes roll, so they're not recognized by their bloodline. They're given a racial classification, which would be Negro in this time of 1963. Is that correct, Judge Joe Brown?
Yes.
And so
it was colored, Negro, and then in a couple of years, it started morphing in 1965, going into 66 to black. Then it went Afro-American, then black. Well, on down went African-American, now black again. Now, you have to understand something about Lyndon Baines Johnson. He was having an affair with a black White House secretary. Years later, I met a son that he had by this secretary. The son was born in 1966, looks just like him, except there was a slight suntan. He had another son born to a woman named Marie Brown. She was white, no relation to mine, but I knew her, and she introduced me to both boys, the one born to her in 1965 and the one born to the black White House secretary in 1966. So Johnson is an interesting character. He set up a school in Texas when he was a young man to teach literacy to black and brown people. A sheriff killed his pet dog, and he became pissed about it, and he decided to run for political office. He and his buddies organized the black and brown people, registered them to vote, and then on election day took them in the various pickup trucks they had and took them to vote, and that's how he won his first office. He was very succinct when he had the first State of the Union message in 1964 after he succeeded Kennedy, who was assassinated. He said he was going to represent all of America, and that what he was going to do essentially was going to shock some people. So he started pushing civil rights, and it was pushed by the Kerner Commission's report that there was a problem in the country that resulted in baby burns starting in 1964, 65, 66, where it wasn't anymore, we shall overcome, and you're marching, holding hands. It's like, you want a piece of this, you about to get it.
Chief Biko, I'll circle back to that. Go ahead with the rest of your questions. I just wanted to drill down on that, Judge Joe Brown. I apologize for cutting Chief Biko's bill.
No, you're all good. And thank you again, dear Judge, for answering that question and just highlighting those individuals and their real character versus what's being told to us, through the media as well as school. I'm actually going to circle back to just a few images, because I know we was talking about segregation, and I know before we jumped into the Civil Rights Acts, we were talking about the migration, or basically the Indian Removal Act. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this image here. So it's basically the migration patterns coming basically in the 1915 to 1970s. And it's kind of similar to those Indian removal maps that we showed earlier. And I know you said your family, believe you said you grew up in Los Angeles area. So I kind of wanted to see, like, what is your thoughts on these?
That's about the way it worked.
Okay.
The earlier darker green stuff of the earlier migration. See, you get these Western territories, you get the Mexican-American War, 1848, you wind up with California being liberated, so to speak, from Mexico, and it becomes a state in 1851. It has an interesting constitution. That's 10 years before the Civil War or the rebellion started. And in it, it specifically mentions color. Interestingly enough, in the context of the University of California, which says in its context, it is an institution to develop leadership. And it says, whereas our colored brethren so recently escaped from slavery, and with relatives who are still slaves, they have a need to develop leadership. Therefore, we set up the University of California to teach them leadership and excellence so that they can lead their people. They talk about the Chinese and talk about their being subjugated to tongs and oppression and their need for leadership. They talk about the Mexicans, and they talk about the Mexican gangs that are oppressing them and the need for leadership and industry, academia, science, literature, business, and within the impacted communities. So they talk about the need for the colored to have the opportunity to do things. And California became a destination for a lot of Black people because it never allowed official segregation. So it was a different kind of experience, but it had a lot of unofficial segregation. And I remember when I was a kid in elementary school, I had a paper route, and there were a couple of places I went through where they said no colored, no Irish either, strangely enough.
Let me ask you a question, Judge Joe Brown, on this map. We know there was a military operation with the Indian Removal Act, and then there's that silent generation, which that timeline, they're saying 1915, but we could basically say 1900 to 1970. Because we're not on code as a group of people and we don't internally have our own business meetings, why don't we account for all the towns lost and all the damage that was done doing what they call the Great Migration, when you're really running people out of towns, putting towns underwater, burning towns, the military was damming up our towns? Why is it that we didn't account for that going into the Civil Rights Acts? Why didn't we do forensic accounting and say, okay, before we integrate, you got to repair us and make us whole while we integrate? It seems like we integrate.
You touched on an important point. It wasn't a matter of why don't you make us whole. See, that is a trap we saw coming way back when, which is why nobody was in on this asked to be made whole. If somebody gives it to you, they can take it back. If you do it yourself, nobody can touch it. James Brown touched on just get out of my way and I'll do it myself. That was what we did. See, there's another thing going. Let's take one of the aspects where there's a duality to it. Black Wall Street got destroyed, right? That's what they say. Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the native tribes, they owned all of the property rights. Nobody black in Tulsa, Oklahoma owned any property rights. They rented. So when you talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, you're talking about the entire population of what became known as Black Wall Street, the black population. They rented from the Native American population, the Indian population. So what winds up happening is it was not cool for the Indian tribes because they lost a lot of rentals when you ran these black folk out, when you decided to go through lynching of you.
Let me play dumb with you, Judge Joe Brown. When it comes to Tulsa, who was over the jurisdiction of Tulsa? Was it a nation of the 5 civilized tribes or the United States government? That's my first question.
In other words, what's going on is members of the 5 civilized tribes were the landlords.
Okay, so if they're the landlords, and according to their treaty, there is no black, they only recognize Negro and people of African descent. So how could they get Tulsa, Oklahoma victims, to use your example, how could they get them caught up in a quagmire of black when their supreme law of the land never recognized black?
Well, Negro is a term of art. Remember what we just looked at? Treaty. It's not a treaty. It says treaty. It's the same thing. Negro came. See, Negro came from.
They lying, Judge Joe Brown. Keep it real. They lying. They can't.
Well, hold on. Let's get to how this happened. Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh, favorites of Queen Elizabeth. She was sticking them, even though she was the Dowager Queen, right? And they had letters of marque, which made them legitimate pirates. So they would raid the Spanish trading routes, and they would seize these ships loaded down with what the Spanish called Negroes. And they would take the Negroes and sell them to the Spanish colonies for way below market price, and they'd make a lot of money. And then in 1619, they brought some to Virginia and said, we have a load of Spanish Negroes. And that's where you get the term Negro, which was what the Spanish called their African slaves. That's how the whole terminology Negro gets imported into the English usage, because Negro in Spanish just means black. Noir en français. So
what you're basically saying is during the Great Migration, when they were running us off our land from the South and we were running Midwest and west of the Mississippi, what you're saying is because you're black, we're just going to use that word and it's not recognized by this government. All the damage that was done to this people, basically, you just have to charge it to the game?
No. What did
how do you get
what did your Indians do that the Negroes did not do?
Well, they're one and the same, correct? Because the people that didn't go to the new 5 civilized tribes, they didn't.
Okay, hold on. We touched on it earlier. Freedmen, those who were free, those who were part of the tribe, who did not have slaves for mothers, so they couldn't be freed because there was no need to free them. Those who escaped. You see, what happens is that when you get those who did not need to be freed because they weren't slaves in the first place, what is it that those people did that the ones who had the slave ancestry that counted, the slave mothers that established their status as slaves, needing to be freed, what did they not do compared to the ones that didn't need it?
That's a trick question because you're being moved by a foreign military. So it's just by
No, that's not the point. They did what everybody else did that is respected by this country, even if there are hostilities between them. See, those that needed to be freed from slave status did not have wars against the United States, either directly or by their kinfolk. Those who needed to be freed did not have ancestors across some water who fought wars against the United States. See, you got Germans that kicked behind World War I, World War II. You got Japanese who, sure enough, did in Pearl Harbor and scared the hell out of folk with kamikazes and Bushido and banzai charges.
You saying we didn't fight?
Have the Spanish-American War, Mexican-American War. You've got Indians, the tribes who took scalps. Now they name trains and places after Indians, the nations. What did they name after Negroes, black folk, Afro-Americans, African-Americans? Booker T. Washington School and Martin Luther King Boulevard.
So are you saying they didn't fight? And I don't.
They did not fight.
Okay.
Now, 50, 40, 45 years ago, I used to run into old white boys. Lloyd Brown, I don't mean no insult, but you know what's wrong? Why there's no good relations with the black man or the Negro man and a white man? You all ain't never fought. White folk will kick each other's butts, bloody each other up, beat the crap out of each other behind the roadhouse, shake hands, and become best friends for life. Goddamn Crouch shot me twice at the Battle of Bulls, but I'll be damned, I got a goddamn Mercedes-Benz in my driveway and a Volkswagen too. And my brother was on EO, got shot once. And goddamn, we got a damn Toyota sitting up in the driveway. Negroes ain't never had no fight with no white folk. Don't deserve no respect. I ain't got nothing against no damn American Indians. Hell, they took scalps. And goddamn, they some badasses. I'm talking about I was in the goddamn 101st Airborne. And when I jumped out of goddamn airplanes over Normandy, we was hollering Geronimo. See how that goes?
As bad as I hate to admit what you're saying, and Chief Biko, jump on in and you can move forward with your bill. I can look at 2024 and look at all the killings and the murders that's been going on with our people. And I have to agree that there's no buck in us, that there's literally nothing that a group of people can't do to the quote unquote Negro, black, colored, or Afro-American. There's nothing that's making us stand up. So I hear what you're saying, but at the higher level,
we shall overcome. Someday, goddamn, some days been here and gone for damn near 3/4 of a goddamn century. You think the tribes would put up with that shit? No, excuse my language. They don't. Never did. They took a scalp, nailed it to the damn lodge pole, and they smiled. And they had treaties because we were dangerous.
Chief Biko, you're on mute, but go ahead with your bill.
Now I was going to jump back to where we said we wanted to start again with the Negro book. That's cool. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, perfect.
We're talking about this migration pattern.
Got you. I'm going to show this here. I know you touched on your travels and things of that nature. Just kind of wanted to get a quick answer.
Green book.
Yeah, did you ever use this or any family members?
Oh, hell yes. But usually the ones that you got also had that Sinclair dinosaur at the top because Sinclair Oil used to sell them. Anytime we went someplace, my old man would buy them. I think they were 35 cents, something like that when we bought them. And see, when you traveled back in the early 1950s in the South, you did not travel at day during daylight. You slept in a Negro or a colored motel by day, or some of the places listed in the Green Book. You could eat at a Greyhound bus depot. It's in the Green Book. They would let you eat. Black folk didn't have to take it out and eat it in the lot someplace. They could actually sit down and eat. So we would take numbers, and when there was a place that didn't have motels, you would call those numbers and people would board you. And you slept during the day. You kept the bedpan in the car, a water bag on the front bumper so the water would stay cool, and you traveled at night. These were not these fancy highways. These looked like lanes and country roads with forest and trees and grass and bushes coming right up to the highway. And they had dim lights on these cars, and it wasn't safe, but it was not safe to travel during the daylight. And if you couldn't find a motel, you stopped some of the colored folk, the Negroes who were field hands out there working in the fields, and you asked them, and they'd tell you where you could go, where there would be forest or trees and some water, and you could park up in there, and you didn't have to worry about it until you got 30 miles from your destination. Then you get out on the road in daylight. Boy, you going right now. I remember that. What you doing in this here fine call, boy? Talking to my old man. You a veteran? God damn. Well, you got something going for you. Where you going, boy? Gonna see who? Wally? Oh, yes, I knows them. Them's good Negro. Them good colored. Yay. In fact, I want you to give a message to, that's your aunt? I want you to give a message to her. My aunt say, thank you for that cookie recipe. Them some damn fine cookies. And you tell Trooper Jackson, he gonna stop you about 15 miles up there in this car. You just tell him you talked to Trooper Robinson already, and this is my number, my badge number. I'll give it to you. Don't forget it, boy. You think you can remember that? 10 miles up, get stopped again. Well, Officer Jackson, badge number so-and-so, said, give you this code word. You been stopped. What you doing here, boy? Oh, I knows them's good people. See, and that's what you had to do. It was crazy. Now, when I was getting ready to go to kindergarten, my mother had worked as a librarian for the summer at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. And my old man's driving. We're in this DeSoto. And we made a mistake of trying to get going too damn early. And it wasn't quite dark when we were near one of these sundown towns where Black folk don't need to be in evidence anywhere near sundown. But they took 3 shots at the car, put 3 bullet holes in it. They didn't lead it far enough on the first one to hit my old man who was driving, but I'm sitting in the back seat. And my mother used to love these little short, highly carbonated Coca-Colas. And she had one and she was drinking it. And she wanted to fool around in the glove compartment, so she handed it to me in the back seat. I'm sitting there, I put it on my knee. Well, a bullet comes through the back door on my dad's side, and it shatters this Coke bottle on my knee. Well, I knew it was a gunshot. I eventually heard it. My old man had been in the war, and I used to love war stories. Oh, they're shooting at us. My mother was cool. She didn't panic. She said, son, lie down on the floor. Don't pass. I'm cool. You know, well, I didn't say cool. I said, it's okay. But I was more worried about her broken Coca-Cola.
Judge Brown, let's keep it real quick. You just described war. You said you couldn't go out during the day, and you just said somebody shot a bottle off your knee. That's war.
Of course it's war. That's what I tell these damn Negroes right now. It ain't fun. This ain't no Al Sharpton eat you ass some fried chicken. This ain't none of this crap with all of these folk getting up handkerchief head. This is war.
So we prisoners. So we are prisoners of war. If you can't drive,
that's what I tell these damn Negroes right.
Uh-oh, you got to look. Okay, your connection, Judge Joe Brown. But I'm just saying, the way you're describing the violence, that sounds like war. If you get caught,
It is war.
okay,
You could die.
okay.
I'm looking at these handkerchief head Negroes right now, compromising about, shut up, fool. I got 17 or 18 close friends in the dirt right now because some killed them. That crap, damn it, where we had some more Negroes doing the works of this mess. UCLA, 1968. In the hallway, 42 people at lunch. We're discussing on setting up a program that dealt with Black history. And some other Negroes were trying to gun in on it. They gunned down 2 people I recruited to the school, John Huggins and Bunchy Carter. Elaine Brown, who wrote a book about the Panther Party, and I were walking up the place, getting ready to head up the stairs when it went down. All this stuff runs right by us. I'm watching folk get done in. See, people die.
Thank you for being
Melvin
honest,
X,
Judge
I
Joe
went to
Brown.
junior high school with. That brother was a good brother, smart brother. He's dead because he got killed. People were getting gunned down left and right. It's a war. And some folk act like it's just an opportunity to belong to a fancy club or something.
Thank you for being honest. Chief Biko, definitely get in so we can stay on schedule and stay on time. But
I'm sorry for doing that. I mean, I get angry sometimes. It is a damn war.
no, you're okay. It's just that this is the reason why we're having this bill for those that are listening. This is why when we talk to elders, Judge Joe Brown's age, they never really talked to us about this because it was war and it is painful to think about all the violence. So thank you for being honest, Chief Biko. Go ahead and let's move through your bill.
Got you. No, and I was just sharing some images as you know the judge was speaking for the audience. That way they can kind of get a visual as well. I'm going to jump into something, Judge. It's pretty much exactly on what we were just talking about with it being war. Can you recall this moment and what impact it might have had on this civil rights movement from your perspective? And I'm talking about the Bloody Sunday, Selma, Alabama. So that's March 7th, 1965. And I'm going to show the image for people while you go into that bill. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, perfect.
That particular march, to my people, we were embarrassed as hell. Man, you see them fool Negroes, they ain't fighting back. Now, what they did not show, and you probably won't see, is when they got to the foot of that bridge, what they wound up running into with those Black folk in the projects. And when you saw the police dogs charge into the crowd, they didn't show them coming sailing back out. Or when a cop goes in there to go get one of the dogs, he comes running out, no helmet, and they beating the crap out of him. We're going, yeah, fight back. You see, we put up with, aren't you guys mad? You're embarrassed that you guys are getting your butts kicked all the time, man. Don't you guys ever fight back, man? Man, say that one more time. I'm busting you right in your mouth, fool. See, so what we saw was embarrassing to hell with those passive Negroes getting their behinds beat and not fighting back. See, I did something, and let me fast forward on this. I was with a DC think tank. It was Catholic University. It was called Center for National Policy Review. And myself and 2 other people, we had to go through 60-some thousand pages in congressional record. There weren't 5 pages in that damn thing that talked about peaceful nonviolence. All of that stuff was about why these folk burning these cities down, doing burn, baby, burn. We got to stop this. They did not give a damn about peaceful civil rights. That is a myth. And there's some clowns still coasting off of their ancestral or their current or their personal involvement in civil rights. We took that as a damn embarrassment for these folk to get their butts beat and be down on their knees while some redneck is beating the crap out of them until another one felt guilty about it.
You dropping
The
balls.
hell with you. We weren't going to do that. By 1965, civil rights was dead because it was already established. It was actualizing that. And I was there August 1965 when LA had that uprising. They called it a riot. Interesting. Little slight digression. When it was over, LAPD would not come up in there unless they were riding 5 or 6 deep in a squad car.
Let's go back to the fire, Judge Joe Brown, real quick. Whose neighborhoods were y'all burning down during that era? Were y'all burning?
We didn't burn our neighborhoods down. We didn't touch any houses. We didn't even touch all the businesses. Okay. I graduated from high school. What happened was it was slum clearance. They burnt down the trap things, the overgrown stuff, the rat traps, all of that. And if a white boy, Korean, I don't care what he was, treated everybody all right, people would be standing out. Leave this guy alone. He's cool.
Okay. So you didn't burn down your neighborhood. You were burning down other groups of people's neighborhoods.
Not other groups, people's neighborhoods, the enemy's neighborhoods.
Gotcha.
The enemy's thing. See, LA was a filthy mess. We had slum clearance. After that, all of these old decrepit buildings are gone. All of the people that were ripping off the neighborhood, gouging on the price, they went down. If they treated somebody okay, leave this dude alone, man. He all right.
Okay.
And there was a different thing that was going on. In LA, they had a whole bunch of gangs, Slauson's, Vikings, De La Soul, Bobtown, businessmen, whatever. And I remember the week before that, my girlfriend lived a couple of blocks from this location, which was about 5 from where the riot started. And she was gone with her dad, and her mom asked me to go down to the store and get a loaf of bread, literally, and some milk and some butter and stuff. So I go down there, and I'm coming out, and somebody's standing out. Where you from, man? I said, I'm independent. You all right? Next person, where you from, man? Bobtown, you cool. Where you from? Bobtown, you cool. Where you from? De La Soul, you cool. Where you from, man? I'm Viking, man. Dale Viking. Make your run, fool. Bam, bam, bam. Fired 3 caps at him. Interestingly enough, about a month after that, riot went down, the uprising. I just happened to be running the same kind of errand again. The same dude standing out there, and the guy he fired 3 caps at walks by. Say, hey, man. Say, what you want, man? Say, I want to apologize, man. I'm sorry for what I did, man. He said, well, that's all right. Burn, baby, burn, man. You know, yeah, man, burn, baby, burn, you know. And they shook hands. There were only 2 black-on-black homicides in LA for 18 months. And those were because in one case, a wife shot her husband for running around on her, and the other one, a girlfriend shot her dude for running around on her. There were no rapes, no robberies, no assaults, no burglaries, none of that crazy stuff.
Let me ask you a dumb question, Judge Joe Brown, and Chief Biko, get on in so you can do your thing. It sounds like what you calling gangs was actually our internal militia trying to protect our neighborhood.
No, they weren't internal militia. They didn't have daddies. They were crybabies in the 6th, 7th, well, 5th and 6th grades, and they posseed up late 7th grade, 8th grade, and then they wanted to go do that. If you want to see how it is, watch Singleton's thing, Boys in the Hood. Mm-hmm. That was 25, 30 years after the fact, 30 years after the fact, but it was the same thing. It just moved from where I was in South Central to the Crenshaw district. So Ice Cube is in that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody wasn't in a gang, but you had to accommodate them, and they were from these folk who didn't have daddies. But most folk had dads in the 50s and 60s. It was hell. Tom Bradley, who became mayor of Los Angeles, second black mayor of Los Angeles. The first one was a Spanish guy who was literally the first mayor for Los Angeles way, way back when. But Tom Bradley had tried to join after he got out of college. They wouldn't take him. He had to go to law school, go to Korea, come back, get sworn in without having to take the bar as a war veteran, and became a lawyer. Then they let him become a squad car rider. So what he was doing, he was patrolling where I grew up. He had a black partner. They'd have meetings with the grown black men. And what would happen is they'd say, look, you got a problem down on 62nd Street that really needs to be cleared up. There's some wrong going stuff on there. Now, if you need to take care of the business, myself and Officer Jackson, you know, we will be your alibi. You couldn't have done it because you were with us. Or we were talking with you. So the men took care of the neighborhood. Everybody had a daddy unless you lost him in Korea or World War II. That happened. There were very few people who got divorced, but, you know, it was man thing, took care of the peace. And Tom Bradley ran the 400 meters in the Olympics, 440, when he was in college. Went to UCLA. He didn't have any qualms about, he never lost a race down a back alley to warm somebody's head, but it was frontier justice. What you doing out here, boy? Oh, Officer Bradley, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean, didn't I tell you to get off this corner? Then get your butt off this corner. Yes, sir.
So, Judge, you kind of spoke on it there. So it sounded like the men, and they weren't, you know, associated with any particular organization or anything. And kind of leads me to my question, like, what role did the Black Panthers play, if any, around
that
time?
Black Panthers are later. The Black Panthers come from the Deacons for Defense and Justice, Louds County, which was in Louisiana. The emblem they used came from the fact that some of them were in the same 761st Armored Battalion that Jackie Robinson had been in. They were known as Patton's Panthers and were in continuous combat longer than any other American unit. They could drive the tanks better, shoot better, because they'd had more practice and training. But they contributed the Black Panther emblem that quite a few of them who became Deacons for Defense and Justice in Louds County bestowed upon what became the Black Panther Party.
Gotcha.
Now, I know the Black Panther Party. I recruited Geronimo Pratt, aka G. I recruited Bunchy Carter, who was formerly head of the Slausons gang before he went to the penitentiary. He was illiterate, taught himself like Malcolm did by memorizing Webster's dictionary and started writing poetry, and I recruited him to UCLA. John Hudgens, who grew up around Yale College, Yale University. His daddy was a janitor for some frat houses. He came back west, and he wound up, I recruited him. Elaine Brown, I recruited her. Nathaniel Clark recruited him. Yeah, I knew the Panther Party. I was in charge of community liaison for the Black Student Union at UCLA, part of the Black Student Alliance. See, we all cooperated with the Nation of Islam and did what we did to try and bestow order. We patrolled the neighborhoods armed. It was legal to have a loaded shotgun or rifle, and everybody had a carbine or a 12 gauge until those idiots went up there and went into the California State Legislative Body after we asked them, please don't do it. And in 2 weeks, they made that stuff illegal. So now LAPD, Oakland Police Department had excuse to go bust folk when they saw them armed, and a whole lot of people got killed. Some cops too.
Gotcha.
See,
No,
it was a war.
Yep. No, and that seems to be the theme, you know, of tonight's discussion. And like you said, I know the Black Panthers came a little bit earlier, but you said they stem from that Deacons of Defense, and I kind of want to segue into that.
That was the mid-60s. See, the Panther Party started about 1967.
Gotcha. So
there was a guy. It started in an interesting way in the LA area. It started off as a college thing until people who had been in the penitentiary started getting out. Sherman Banks was a college student at Cal State LA. He was chairman. you know, you had that kind of thing. He just said after a while, hey, you know, this is getting crazy. Then Bunchy Carter became chairman. He just got out the penitentiary after serving time, and he had been running the Slawsons as a gang.
Interesting. And I'm gonna go ahead